Welcome, everyone. I now call the February 11th, 2025 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. At this point, we'll take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Thank you. Councilmember Zorn?
Here.
Mayor Thompson?
Here.
Councilmember Alders?
Here.
Councilmember Kurd?
Here.
Councilmember Mankey? Councilmember Dodd?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Here.
All present with the exception of Councilmember Mankey, who is absent and excused.
Thank you. Before we continue with the rest of the agenda, I'd like to reiterate some guidelines. For remote meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently, and mute your microphone when not speaking. First up on our agenda is meeting agenda approval. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Next up is proclamations. And we have one proclamation tonight for Black History Month. Whereas Black History Month is an annual celebration of the achievements of Black and African Americans in the inextricable role they play in United States history, and whereas Black History Month was officially recognized by President Gerald Ford in 1976 after more than 60 years of research and advocacy by historian Carter G. Woodson and Minister Jesse E. Moreland, who founded the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and whereas the omission of history and contributions of Black and African Americans from textbooks and other literature has contributed to pervasive systemic racism in the United States, such that it is essential to honor the extraordinary contributions made by Black Americans throughout history. And whereas we celebrate the legacy of Black Americans whose power to lead, to overcome, and to expand the meaning and practice of American democracy has helped our nation become a more fair and just society. And whereas it is a moral imperative that we learn about, shed light upon, and condemn the inhumanity and inequities that Black and African Americans continue to experience and endure, while celebrating the countless achievements and contributions of Black organizers, scholars, artists, and community members. Now, therefore, I, Mason Thompson, Mayor of the City of Bothell, do hereby proclaim February 2025 as Black History Month in the City of Bothell and reaffirm the City of Bothell's commitment to fighting anti-Black discrimination through its values, policies, and practices. All right, moving on. Next up on our agenda is public comment. The city has accepted public comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to City Clerk no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all City Council members and are part of the record. When the clerk calls your name, you will have 3 minutes to speak. Please note that council will receive your input, but we do not engage in discussion of these topics. Staff will make note of items requiring follow-up. City Clerk, do we have visitor sign-ups?
We do. Thank you, Mayor Thompson. First, before I begin with the in-person sign-ups, I do have 2 written comments that were received. One from David Levitin regarding transportation funding options and the Safe Streets levy. And Sarah Gustafson also wrote in regarding transportation funding options and Safe Streets levy. I have...
Hey, you having trouble putting that on mute, Terry? Yeah.
Can somebody help?
There we go.
Thank you. I have 2 people signed up to speak this evening. The first one is Juliana, and she is virtual, so I've paneled her in. Juliana, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, before we begin, I'd like to let you know you'll have 3 minutes, and since you're not here, you probably can't see the lights at the dais, but at 1 minute, at 30 seconds, well, when it beeps, we'll let you know. Sorry, you can't see the lights. So go ahead, your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. My name is Juliana Fulta, and I'm a social work graduate student at Seattle University. I'm also going on my 10th year in living in Bothell, which is so wonderful. I'm here today to advocate for equitable housing policies and stronger community engagement efforts that ensure all Bothell residents, especially those historically marginalized, have a voice in shaping the future of our city. Housing is a fundamental right, yet many in Bothell struggle to find affordable, stable places to live. We know that past zoning laws have disproportionately limited access to housing for lower income families and communities of color. However, with the Imagine Bothell Comprehensive Plan and the upcoming Housing Action Plan, which I'm very excited about, we have the opportunity to correct these disparities and build a more inclusive city by revising zoning laws to allow more diverse housing types and implementing policies that create dedicated, affordable housing alongside market rate developments. We can prevent displacement while increasing access to all homes for all income levels. However, equitable policies must be built on the voices of those they impact the most. That's why I urge the Council to fully commit to the community engagement approach outlined in the Housing Action Plan. As the city has stated, the primary goals of this effort are to maximize community participation, actively engage underrepresented groups, and accurately convey community input to decision makers. To uphold these principles, Bothell must go beyond traditional engagement strategies, meaning holding community forums in diverse neighborhoods, ensuring all outreach materials are accessible in multiple languages, and establishing an advisory board made up of residents from underrepresented groups. Too often, critical policy decisions are made without the perspectives of renters, immigrants, or lower income families, groups that are deeply affected by housing affordability and neighborhood development. By prioritizing these efforts, we ensure that housing policies are truly reflective of and responsive to the needs of our entire community. Bothell is a growing, diverse city, and we have a responsibility to ensure that all residents, regardless of background or income, can call this place home. I encourage the Council to strengthen the Housing Action Plan with intentional community-driven engagement and policies that protect against displacement. Let's work together to ensure Bothell remains a city where everyone has a voice and a place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dan Hudson.
Am I good to go? All right. Good evening, City Council members. My name is Dan Hudson. I'm a 27-year resident of Bothell. I'm proud to be a Bothell resident. With the Trump administration tearing down anything DEI and causing hell for any organization having a DEI program, what is the City of Bothell DEI office doing to be immune from certain threats from the federal government, i.e., federal funding, if in fact the City of Bothell gets funding? I'm a proud product of DEI. From 35 years ago, it was not called DEI, it was called affirmative action. And if it wasn't for affirmative action, I would not be the person I am today. DEI must be on the right side of history when so many people do not want to see diversity, equity, and inclusion in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have signed up. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? I do have one person in the virtual audience. Alex, if you wish to speak under public comment, please use raise hand function and I'll panel you in. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda is reports. The city manager report is first up. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. We do have two staff presentations for you tonight, one from city staff and one coming from WSDOT. Before I do, I just wanted to note, while you'll notice we didn't have a public engagement calendar tonight, mainly because you heard the same events last week and you will the next meeting as well. I did want to highlight that one of the things that we've been advertising on that slide is the the online application is open for boards and commissions, and we do encourage those in the community who wish to apply to do so by February 21st. I also wanted to note that as well as the council-appointed boards and commissions, following up on our board and commission conversation and the decision to add a administrative advisory body, that we're also collecting invitations for people who want to apply for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, which will be appointed by me as the city manager. So anyone who is interested in applying, please do so. With that, I'm going to introduce our first staff briefing, which is coming from our Community Development Department. We have multiple staff presenters. Looks like with us tonight, we have both Ray Sosa, who's a senior planner with community development, joined by Jason Greenspan, the community development director. And I'll turn it over to them to bring up their presentation and move forward.
Hey, City Manager.
Yes, Mayor.
Could I request a quick pause in reports?
Yeah.
We didn't have anybody in the organizations we normally work with to accept the Black History Month proclamation, and I just went out and chatted with Dan, and he'd be happy to accept it and say a few words. Can we back up and do that?
Absolutely.
Awesome. No problem.
This is impromptu, right? I just want to let everybody know that Black History Month means a lot to a lot of people, but it especially means a lot to me because of my family, the situations that involve, especially right now, Black History Month, and the reason why it's called Black History Month is because it takes an entire month to know exactly what the Black experience is in America, okay? And the thing about it is, like for me and my family, my grandkids, I let them know as far as what Black people have done to this country and building this country. And it's something that if we don't keep continuing to let people know, let our young people know, just like anybody else, whether you're white, brown, or blue, it's part of a history. And the thing is that what constitutes everything is certain people want to discredit the history of this country. The history of this country is black and white, but people are trying to screw it. Because there's good in America, there's bad in America, but it is the history of America. Right now, I would never have thought 10 years ago that this country might go back to the 1950s. And the 1950s was very bad for people of color. And the thing about it is that this shining star, who used to be the shining star of the world, is really looked bad upon in Europe. The reason I know that is because I was an Air Force officer, which means basically that's how affirmative action, that's how I became an officer. I was an Air Force aviator. I was a pilot navigator. I would have never become a pilot navigator without affirmative action, which is DEA today. So Black history is important to me. It's important to the Black community. It should be important to all Americans because that is our history. You cannot, whatever you try to do, you cannot erase the fact we will be here. We've always been here and we'll always be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for coming up unprepared.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
I mean, I wish I sounded that good when I was prepared.
I won't second that. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Jason and Ray.
Thank you, City Manager. Jason Greenspan, Community Development Director. I'm here this evening with Ray Sosa, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department and Long Range Planning. As I know you all know, we've completed the Comprehensive Plan update as of December of 2024. We are now very much in implementation phase of the Comprehensive Plan. Last month, you heard a little bit about the Urban Forestry Management Plan and our Climate Action Plan. Next month, you'll hear a little bit more about our downtown sub-area update. This month, we're here to talk about the Housing Action Plan and how that will help us implement the recommendations and policies included in our housing element. With that, Ray, please take it away.
Thank you, Jason. Good evening, Council. My name is Ray Sosa. As Jason said, I'm a Senior Planner with the Community Development Department. Tonight, I'll give a brief high-level overview of the Housing Action Plan. The purpose of the staff briefing is to provide Council with a status update and overview of the Housing Action Plan. No action is required. So, sorry. To dive a little bit into the background of the Housing Action Plan, we got direction from the City Council to create this Housing Action Plan in March of last year. And the reason why we want to create this Housing Action Plan is to implement the policies set forth by the comprehensive plan that was adopted last month, in December of last year. And so this Housing Action Plan will help us meet those goals, including ensuring that there's housing for people of all incomes, ensuring that there's housing diversity, and ensuring that we are meeting our workforce and housing goals. And so this housing action plan is an update to the 2018 housing strategy, which is an implementation of the 2015 comp plan update. All fundamental middle housing and HB 1110 requirements have been met as of now, and we're working on making sure that we are in compliance and in equivalence to that and by the end of June as well. And that is also the leverage work completed to move forward. So we divided the Housing Action Plan into 4 phases. We are phase 1, scoping, phase 2, community engagement, phase 3, preliminary draft, and then phase 4 on the final draft. Right now, we are in phase 1, scoping, which is including meeting with Planning Commission, which we met last month, and we're meeting with City Council this evening. We'll be meeting with City Council in a few months as well to have a more in-depth study session as well. But after we finish our preliminary study sessions with both Planning Commission and City Council, will be kicking off our community engagement phase in phase 2. I want to emphasize that we'll also be having continuous community engagement throughout all the phases of the community of the Housing Action Plan, and we plan for periodic check-ins as we transition from each phase of the Housing Action Plan. Further code changes that conclude the draft zoning amendments for increased dwelling units, affordable housing, density near transit will be completed by the end of June 2025. Any further code changes that might have an impact on growth target goals will be part of that discussion as well. And we hope to have this plan completed by the summer of 2026. And so for community engagement approach, primary goals of our engagement are to maximize community participation, including actively engaging with underrepresented groups, accurately convey community input to decision makers, and we'll have a more detailed strategy based on our city's community engagement toolkit developed by the end of phase 1. In summary, no action is required. This briefing is intended to provide council with the opportunity to discuss and provide input on the Housing Action Plan with respect to Tier 1 housing code standards and RMFTE policies. Thank you.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and for all of the work that you've put in so far to bring this to us. I especially want to call attention to the tab on Engage Bothell that includes the Housing Action Plan. I see that that's already up. And I realize that the community engagement piece hasn't started yet, but I'm guessing that that is where some of the community engagement will be found, is on Engage Bothell. Is that correct? Cool. Yeah, I think that hearing that it's not going to be completed until 2026 is a little like, oh, wow, okay, there's going to be a lot of work that goes into this. That's an indication of just how long it'll take will mean that there's a lot to do. But I'm really grateful to see the effort in community engagement and engaging underrepresented groups. I especially want to know that this Housing Action Plan will be conducted in a way that will address the needs of people who are most affected by housing insecurity or housing unaffordability, and not being able to access housing that they can't afford. I think that is what is being communicated to in this presentation, and so I really do appreciate that. Just encourage you to focus on those who experience the highest need in our community, so that we can address those needs and really problem solve as a community, so that we're not losing some of the talented community members that we have here. So thank you very much, and thanks for listening.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm excited about this housing action plan. And if you could clarify, though, last year when we talked about this, we also discussed completing the whole thing this year. So, but it looks like it's going to take longer than, or it's going to happen next year. So, am I misremembering what we talked about?
When the city council took action last March and directed us to develop that housing action plan, we made a commitment to return by June of this year with strategies for increasing production of middle housing opportunities and increasing density, partnering that with affordable housing strategies as well. And so we're committed to delivering that this year. I think we learned through the community engagement process for the comprehensive plan, and also learning that 75% of our housing target is for households that are below 80% of the area median income. We need to be very intentional to listen to the community and let that community engagement process really be extended and thoughtful. And so while we are committed to delivering code changes by the middle of this year to address last year's directive, we have other strategies that really need to be teased out to get to those other income bands, and coming up with very specific strategies to address affordability needs and reduce displacement. And I think that's why we're really thinking about going into 2026. Not that we won't have some code changes that will be ready this year for your consideration, but it's really to let that full community engagement process span out so that we have other implementation strategies on top of that.
And I fully appreciate this, and thank you. The question I have is, we do need community engagement. We all talk about community engagement. We need to do it in more intentional, so like was mentioned earlier. What zoning changes are what code changes are gonna happen this year if 70% of so we're talking about the 30% code then in general of the above 80% AMI that will happen this year then?
I think once we have looked at the city in full post comprehensive plan updates, as you recall, in December of 2024, we made some pretty aggressive density increases throughout the city that really compounded the changes that we made with middle housing earlier in the year. So we want to focus our code updates to address whatever gaps still remain in terms of meeting some of those middle housing targets and goals that the city council has articulated. Those, I think, will be the focus of the code changes this year. We'll also focus on how to address some more permanent affordability solutions. But I think that is the part that needs a little bit more thought that would extend beyond the middle of this year. So I think the code changes will focus on addressing some of those middle housing directives that we got, partnering that with some affordability requirements, but then being more thoughtful about affordability going into next year.
And I appreciate that. Are we going to be, because there's a 9-month period where we do the community engagement, which is okay, but are we going to be having conversation as we're talking to the community so that we can just get the information and have a discussion around what we learned, what else we need to learn?
Absolutely.
What question?
We certainly don't want to wait till the end to be able to process some of the feedback we get.
Okay.
We also really want to identify community champions and partners that help us communicate with households in the city that may not be, frankly, trusting of government, that may be a little skeptical about why we're interested. So we need to develop those partnerships and that trust, and that's going to take a little bit of time.
And Deputy Mayor, just to point you back to, so specifically, and we can send this out, Resolution 1473 was adopted by Council last March that did specify exactly which code changes. Part of your question was which areas of code. So it will be, as you'll recall from last year, a big driver of this was coming from the adoption of middle housing code and then the conflict between where Bothell was heading and then compliance with the state law portion. So a big portion of this is going to be focused specifically on the 4 units of, for middle housing, 4 dwelling units per lot on all zoned lots for residential use. And then what are the potential future zoning code amendments that incorporate mechanisms to produce dedicated affordable housing in tandem with that. So that was the primary focus. There's some other things in there too, but from a code perspective to your question, those are specifically the areas that we're committed to for June of this year.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm eager to get ready and working on this housing action plan. I'm encouraged that we'll be doing robust public engagement. And I'm also wondering, you're asking for feedback on Tier 1 housing code amendments, I think, in the presentation, or code standards. I'm not really quite sure what that means, but looking back at some of the scoping, I didn't watch the Planning Commission meeting from earlier this year that you came to give a presentation on, but looking through the agenda for that meeting, there was kind of some scoping initial documentation, and one of the things that caught my eye was parking minimums as part of these elements that we'd be discussing and we'd be looking into. And I'm wondering if I could get more information about the status of addressing parking minimums as part of a more comprehensive strategy in the city versus just in terms of housing action plan. So I was under the impression that we'd be addressing parking minimums as sort of a separate tract, but do you envision it being part of this housing action plan instead?
I think it's connected to the housing action plan, but you're correct. We would be looking at that independently as well. I think to accelerate housing production and to increase housing supply, we need to right-size our parking requirements. And we've already taken a lot of steps in that direction, not as far perhaps as we need to go. We've already reduced middle housing parking requirements significantly for lots that are near transit, that are less than 6,000 square feet. We have incentives for reduced parking for affordable housing. But I think a comprehensive look at the city code and reducing parking requirements and revisiting those minimums is essential. We have a fairly suburban model of our code that I think requires a new look. And you'll hear next week when we come with a more focused discussion on our work plan, how we plan to talk about revisiting parking minimums, providing a lot more flexibility and options that we have right now. Again, we've moved in that direction, but I think a little haltingly, and I think we can lean into that perhaps a little bit more with the city council's direction. As I'm sure you know, there is some legislation pending before the state, and we are closely monitoring that to make sure that we stay in alignment. We had that similar problem with our middle housing code last year where we're on two different tracks. So we want to make sure that we are monitoring closely what the state is doing, but also making sure we are able to update our own code to reflect Bothell's goals.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I'm interested to hear the timelines, especially for parking, addressing parking from both an enforcement level and mandates that the city imposes that are duplicative on top of other systems that are already in place. So I think I don't just speak for myself that this council has placed a priority. I mean, we have multiple members of the council have testified in Olympia for reduction of government mandated parking minimums. And it doesn't also go unnoticed that our city isn't walking its talk yet. And I'm hoping that we can address that sooner rather than later. And it sounds like on a separate tract might be good because it's not only wrapped up in housing affordability, but also in urban form and just in general more in alignment with the comprehensive plan than just housing affordability in action. So thanks.
Thank you. Also really excited and looking forward to the housing action plan. Following up on Councilmember Curd's conversation, just so I'm clear, is parking something that we should talk about next week in terms of like timing on the work plan outside of the housing action plan? Or is it something that is wrapped up in part of this, and we need to have that conversation before next week.
We've framed next week's conversation. You'll see the packet come out presumably in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
To have a specific element of parking requirements called out separately from the Housing Action Plan. The Housing Action Plan needs to address parking in some way, but we don't want them to be reliant upon each other. I think we need to understand your timing, and we have a process where we can expedite addressing parking minimums.
Awesome.
So that it's not necessarily waiting until 2026,
Yeah.
for example.
Perfect. No, and I mean, it'll fit in, as Councilmember Curd said, with a lot of our other goals like tree canopy and things like that as well. So I'm excited to have that conversation next week.
Okay.
When we also thank you for calling out the 4 units by right and doing that earlier and like bringing back code amendments along the way. We started public outreach for our middle housing plan in 21, I think, something like that. Like we've done lots of public engagement on that. And I think that it's just good for us to follow through on what we've already talked about with our community and the promises we've already made. In terms of the Housing Action Plan, I have been super curious to hear what kind of ideas of things that we're going to be talking about and discussing, and what staff is looking to do to address some of these things. Is this, I'm assuming there will be a study session at some point in time for this. That would probably be the appropriate time to talk about ideas and questions and things like that.
That's right. I don't want to put Ray on the spot because we are coming back with a study session, but I know you have a few ideas that have been tossed around at the Planning Commission that you might be able to at least speak about briefly here.
Sure, yes. And so during Planning Commission, we did bring up these ideas. So the draft goals and objectives document was posted and presented to Planning Commission as well. And so one of the few ideas that we talked about that I'll just highlight, we talked about potential looking at the surplus property that the city owns, and what do we do with that property, either looking at some models where we can use that to create some affordable housing, either through social housing models or through some innovative agreements with developers, and also looking at TOD and looking at some of the parking lots that we have in the city that will be underutilized once the BRT comes along. And so we want to have priority with the discussions with Sound Transit and King County Metro as well. And so those are just ideas that we looked at as part of the goals and objectives document that we posted.
It sounds like I need to go watch that Planning Commission meeting, or at least check out the packet. There's some really exciting stuff in there that I'm excited about, and I'm looking forward to having that study session too.
We do have one more staff report if that's the end of the questions for Ray and Jason.
Can I ask just one question on the Housing Action Plan will encompass all types of housing that we are required to zone for and allow to be built in the city, and that includes permanent supportive housing, right?
That is correct. And again, our comprehensive plan sets forth the policy, and our code sets forth the regulatory environment. Right now, for that to happen, this is really leaning into more tools and strategies to more actively produce that versus just a wait and see attitude. So yeah, and it will definitely address permanent supportive housing.
Okay, great. Thank you for confirming.
Councilmember Dodd?
Thanks. I didn't say anything earlier because I get caught up in the things that we've put in our code that haven't resulted in more housing. So I'm getting very excited for the study session. So thank you for that and the little preview. So I'm really excited to learn what can we do that will hopefully get those projects versus just make it possible, which is pretty exciting. Thanks.
All right.
Laura, bet the over in the working copy for that study session that's upcoming, okay?
I'm looking at the projected agenda and think we might have to load balance a little bit, but I will just, a couple teasers. Next week, the council is scheduled to have a joint presentation with the Planning Commission, and then on March 4th is currently when we're scheduled for the Housing Action Plan standalone. Thank you both, and I think we'll transition to the next presentation.
Sounds good.
All right. So this evening, periodically, the council has been receiving updates from the Washington State Department of Transportation on the Interstate 405 Express Toll Lanes project. Tonight, we have one of those presentations. So we have a team here from WSDOT to support the conversation. And as they bring up, or I don't know, Amy, are you sharing, or how are we doing slides? All right, you've got it. Well, I am going to go ahead and introduce Johan Jorna, the lead development review engineer from WSDOT, to begin introductions, and then we do have a presentation about what's to come. Red ironically means on.
You know, I thought I had that figured out from last time, but I still don't. So anyways, good evening, Mayor and City Council. Again, my name is Johan Jorna, the lead development review engineer here at the city. So I've been working as the project liaison with WSDOT for the I-405 ETL Brickyard 527 project. We've been working in close collaboration with both WSDOT and the design builder Skanska, as it is a DB project. And with me tonight is Evelyn Powell, the project director, who will be presenting a brief status update on the project.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me here today to provide you a quick project update since we last meet. Before I start, I would like to thank the city for your continued support and collaboration with us in delivering this project. So here's the agenda for today. First, I would like to quickly go over some of the key accomplishments that we accomplished in the year of 2024. Then I will share what's coming up and what to expect in the next few months. And lastly, I would like to provide additional information and update about the pad and bike access at the Kenyon Park parking right based on the last project update with the mayor, deputy mayor, and the council members. Maybe before we dive into the project update, I would like to provide a quick project overview. So this project will expand the dual express tolling on both I-405 southbound and northbound, and we'll be also adding the two direct access ramp at I-405 at State Route 527 interchange and State Route 522 interchange. The project also consists of multimodal transportation pieces, including the 3 new BRT Sound Transit BRT station, which also consists of pedestrian and bike connection to the transit facility. Here's a quick overview of the major construction milestone for the project. We are approximately at 60 to 70% complete with the design. We are currently scheduled for toll commencement in summer 2028 and project substantial completion in late 2028. In the next few slides, I will go over some construction highlights in 2024. This is at the southern part of the project at I-405 Northeast 160th interchange near the Brickyard parking right. We have completed a traffic shift for both I-405 northbound and southbound mainline Q4 2024 in order to create more work zones on both outside of 405 to reconfiguring the Brickyard parking right, including the relocation of the bus stop. In addition, we have also installed the traffic ITS from 160th to State Route 522. There are 4 major construction areas in the year of 2024, as is shown in the highlight green area. They're mainly hovering over the I-405 State Route 522 interchange. And in the next few slides, I will go over each area and some of the accomplishments that we did in 2024. So here we're looking at the southeast corner of the interchange along northbound I-405 on the hillside. We have been working on the ground improvement in this area and also start retaining wall construction to support the future I-405 northbound to eastbound State Route 522. We have been working in this area since summer 2024. We are approximately 60% complete with the wall construction. Next, we'll be seeing a lot of the wall finish along the site. And now we'll continue traveling a little bit north towards the project near Woodinville Drive, south of the Sammamish River. The project has successfully relocated 5 utilities in this area, including an overhead power. We also completed ground improvement in this area for the future off-ramp bridge structure. Some bridge structures started Q3 of 2024, including the plow installation. And we also started bridge foundation, which is a drill shaft, in November 2024 in this area. Now we are traveling further up north at the north of the Sammamish River. We're on 522 looking west right now. The construction of the fish passage in this area has been the concentration work in 2024. The fish passage is breaking down to 4 segments. We have completed the first segment and now shift to the westbound 522 to northbound 405. We're currently working on the second stage of this fish passage work. And now we are at the northeast quadrant of the I-405 State Route 522 interchange. The project have completed the resurfacing of both direction of the mainline I-405 between State Route 522 to just the north of the northeast 195th under 2 full weekend closure at Q3 of 2024. It was the area that we need to address as we have a lot of pave revealing, and we really appreciate city's support in collaborating with us for the 2 weekend closures. We have also received a lot of positive comments from the public and the community regarding the improvement in this area. We have also been working the ground improvement as showing the kind of the bottom right-hand corner. We have been building a retaining wall and working on the ground improvement in this area for the future westbound 522 to northbound 405 interchange. In the next few slides, I will go over what's coming up and what to expect. And the construction will continue into the from phase 2 to phase 3 of the fish passage construction in this area. And we'll also be continue building the wall along the future westbound 522 to I-405 northbound. And traveler can anticipate traffic shift, alignment change towards the north of 522 to create more work zones so we can continue to segment 3 and segment 4 in this area. And the construction for the future I-405 northbound to State Route to eastbound 522 will also be continuing. We have created a short detour at the Sammamish River Trail to create work zone. Trail user will anticipate some brief daytime closure of the trail ranging from 15 minutes to 45 minutes. And this year we'll also be working at I-405 State Route 527 interchange. We'll be creating some work zone to start the work of North Fork Perry Fish Passage and the future roadway construction, including the noise wall in this area. And traveler could anticipate traffic alignment change at I-405, both northbound and southbound. So in order to by shifting the traffic in the middle, so we can create more working area on the side to complete both work. And I would like to share the latest progression regarding the pedestrian and bike access and movement for the Kenyon Park Park and Ride. Last time we met, we've been discussing about the ped and bike access at the Kenyon Park Park and Ride. Currently, we're still trying to finalizing the design in this area. And here's a very general overview of the pedestrian and bike route movement looks like in this area. So on the screen, you can see the green highlights over here. That will be the bike and ped movement when the project is done. And this project will be also building the ped bridge in this area, and we'll be demoing the old one. So this will be the bike and ped access in what's showing in green. And the yellow highlighted area will be the future motorist movement. We have a roundabout here, and they will continue to travel towards in the middle, which is the inline station, will be signalized intersection in this area. And as a project progresses, and we would like to continue to keep the community and our partner updated with the latest progression on the project. Here are all the platforms that we're utilizing to provide the latest information. We have a quarterly project update that is open to everyone who are interested to join. The next one will be February the 26th. And here are the ways to connect and stay updated with the project. And the best way to stay informed is to subscribe to the email update. And please email to the address and request to be added. We also update our project website on a regular basis, and you can scan the QR code to access our project website. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Zorns.
I had to jump in before all the thoughts left my head. The QR code works. I tried it this afternoon, so that was fun. And I'm thinking we need an app for that. So, at any rate, and thank you for the presentation. I'm a bystander, an observer. I don't want to mess with it because you guys have this so well thought out. I did want to make a comment that I love seeing Little Park Creek being taken care of because it's really struggled over the years. So I appreciate you addressing that. One question: the 15 to 45 minute closures on the river trail.
Yep.
What's the time frame that's going to be happening? Like between what dates?
Daytime.
Daytime for the next couple years,
For the next couple months.
next couple months. So like maybe June it will be open again with no intermittent closures, or maybe middle of summer.
We are right now. I think they're telling us it's before the summer. Right.
Before the summer. Great. Well, thank you. This was great, and I love the bird's eye view because it gives a nice perspective of all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Curd.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It's fun to see the project progress. And I'll echo those bird's eye views. Really go to show how huge of a project this is. It's a massive undertaking, and I wouldn't want to be the project manager. So kudos to you all who are working on this project. I think some of the feedback that I've gotten from the community is like an encouraging surprise at how well stormwater impacts from the project. It's happening right on the bank of the Sammamish River, and people are paddling and doing fish sampling and checking water quality there, and they're not noticing impacts from construction. So pass along to your construction crew that they're doing a great job keeping our water safe and healthy. So thank you for doing that. I'm also wondering, we're close to getting out of the dark, the big dark. And last time that you were here, I asked about worker safety, especially while we are trying to have reduced speed limits, or reducing speed in the construction areas. I'm hoping for a quick update. Have there been any incidents with safety from crews working in the area, and what are some of the ways that you'll be managing kind of speeds in these construction zones going forward? Has it been working the way that you've been thinking, or are people still kind of going too fast?
Yeah. Yes. We are continuing monitoring that area. Yes, I think we see some slowing down, but it's not quite towards the area we want to see. I think there have been state patrol enforcement in the area right now. We have also been looking at some pilot project for speed zone camera as well, but it's still not quite materialized to share at the moment. But we're definitely looking at other means and methods to encourage people to drive in the manner that it needs to be, as this will be the permanent configuration when the project is open to the public.
Right. Yeah. Especially, it will be slower later on, and signalization will probably assist with that. But during construction, I was extremely worried because cars are going so fast on 522 and on the on-ramps and so forth. But hopefully as the days get longer, and that helps construction crews stay safe as well. So thanks for the update.
Oh, thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thanks. Thank you for the updates. I really appreciate it. And now I'm going to ask if there's a little more in there with some of the changes. So like, I'm thinking about, just probably it's because it's closer to me and my daily use of this freeway, the pedestrian infrastructure along the overpass in Canyon Park. Is any of that being updated with this work?
Yeah.
I saw the new pedestrian bridge and all that. I just wasn't sure about sort of the nearby infrastructure.
Yes, so we are constructing new elevators, pedestrian bridge, and the connection to the pedestrian bridge as well. So we are working a lot in this area.
Okay, and I totally am excited about that. I'm along 527. Like right now, it's been kind of the same overpass for a while, and I didn't know if that was in scope or not.
No.
Okay, I had to get optimistic, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for coming. I have just a couple quick questions. First, a comment. I am really excited to have a presentation about this project where we aren't talking about adjusting the timeline. That's cool. The bike trail for the to the future pedestrian bridge that goes parallel toward, it looks like there's a new on-off ramp there. Is that going to be protected by something solid? Is that going to be a separate path, or is that going to be paint on the side of the road?
I just want to make sure I understand your question correctly. Are you talking about the path over here?
Yes.
Going here?
The part of it that goes parallel to the 17th Avenue Southeast.
Oh, the one.
No,
sorry.
by the parking lot and like the access points. That right there, yeah, that whole thing.
In protected. Okay.
Yes.
So right now we're still working on the development of the design. Where I foresee might be a sidewalk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, the more protection you could put there, the better. That is in our design standards for bike lanes. So.
Yeah. On the north side of the roundabout you're seeing on the screen, that
Yes.
will be protected up to 220th though. So that will be quite a big expansion.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. And you guys didn't bring up Brickyard with bike and pedestrian improvements, and since the flyover is still there on the website, like I assume you just didn't bring it up because there weren't any changes to it?
Correct. But they're currently still under design development.
Yeah.
So, but
Perfect.
yes, I think
They're still in scope.
that's correct.
Awesome. Cool. That's all I got. Thank you guys. Really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
All right, next up, oh, wait. We have council committee reports, community reports, and conversation. All right, Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind everybody, so I don't have any committee reports, but just a reminder that this Friday is Valentine's Day, and that's not what makes it special. It's that the shelter in Kenmore through Lake City Partners is hosting an open house in the morning, mid-afternoon, and so the community is invited to see the new shelter and to celebrate its opening, I believe, at 11. I will verify that and get back to you.
And that information would be on Lake City Partners website, I'm thinking. That's where I RSVP'd, so.
Yes, and,
Okay.
and social media, yeah.
Question, more of a comment? All right. Next up is projected agenda discussion. Does anybody have an item they'd like to bring up for future consideration?
11 a.m. to 1 p.m. It is not, that is the time. Going back, I do not
Perfect.
have a projected agenda item.
All right, and I would be happy to accept a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Dodd?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Dodd and a second from Deputy Mayor Alcabra to approve the consent agenda. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? Seeing none. City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Kurd?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Alcabra?
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next up is ordinances and resolutions. We have Agenda Bill 25020 to adopt a resolution authorizing the approval of a Regional Coalition for Housing 2025 Work Program, 2025 Administrative Budget Request, 2024 Housing Projects, and 2024 Housing Trust Fund Request. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and city members of the City Council. Tonight is an annual update related to the city's membership in a regional coalition for housing. I made sure to spell it out, but Mayor, you took care of it for me. Otherwise, ARCH throughout the rest of this presentation. Just as a reminder, I currently serve as the City of Bothell's representative on the executive board, and our community development director, Jason Greenspan, serves as the alternate. Bothell is one of 13 member cities within King County, which is part of ARCH, a member of ARCH. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like here this evening. Tonight, you have a resolution before you that takes up several actions. And as I noted, it's an annual visit, and so we've traditionally lumped together several things that the council gets to consider. Some of them are going to be very familiar to you, including the work program and the budget from ARCH that was transmitted back in June, and it has been incorporated into the city's budget. So all of this is anticipated, but traditionally, it's been something that's been brought in context with then some actions that you get to take about how is our money being spent within the region. So that's why it comes together. We'll take a look at that in the future and see if it still makes sense. But again, if there's any questions about any of these actions, we'll be able to take them up tonight, and I'll break them down a little bit more individually in a minute. But before I do, I wanted to point to a reminder that last year in March, there was a strategic planning effort that came together and was completed, and the basic thesis of the strategic plan boils down to a reflection of what we've been talking about even with the housing action plan tonight, is that we have a regional pressure, a national pressure around the need for more affordable housing. So the tagline of the strategic plan is to challenge ARCH of how do we build more affordable housing faster. So there's been a lot of successes over the 30 plus years of ARCH, but ultimately as we look at what makes ARCH successful in the future, would be building more affordable housing faster. So I'll talk about some of the ways that that's informed decisions about the funding that is being recommended tonight. Within the strategic plan, there's 4 elements. It's governance and administration. So thinking about 13 cities working together, and the fact that then 13 cities are taking the action that you're taking tonight is a good question of like, is that what we want, or are there other ways? Not here to say that there's a change, but again, the question of could there be is certainly worth asking. State and regional policy and funding engagement, local policy and planning of how do we coordinate across the region. I think that's been a conversation that we've had here in Bothell quite a bit, is that we can make changes in one community, but if we don't make changes that are consistent across the region, will we really have an impact? And then finally, program implementation, which is really consisting of housing investments, incentives, and preservation and stewardship of existing housing. We don't want to go backwards. Beginning this year, then, a strategic plan dashboard will be posted on the ARCH website to help track progress about what the steps are within those 4 categories, and I will be sure to share those updates with you throughout the year. I mentioned breaking down that very long resolution slide. So really there's 3 areas that we're going to be focusing on tonight. Again, part of our membership in ARCH does give the City Council authority to review and approve the annual work program and budget for ARCH. We will also be making financial considerations, and as I mentioned, these are all anticipated within the city's budget that you adopted for 25 and 26. What we'll be doing is allocating some general fund money for membership, and then also the city does also allocate a portion of sales tax revenue that goes towards the Housing Trust Fund. Speaking of which, that segues into, you will also be hearing a few highlights from the Housing Trust Fund allocation for 2024 that's being recommended before you about putting some affordable housing into the marketplace. And that's where we'll spend the majority of our time. With that, I'll transition to the discussion of the Housing Trust Fund overview, and we'll specifically focus first on projects that were recommended for funding. Just to give an overall picture, there were 10 projects submitted to ARCH for consideration with a total value of $11.7 million. So 10 projects, $11.7 million. They were competing for $4.9 million in available dollars for awards. So again, we know there's a high volume of need in our region. This year's recommendations account for a proposed 246 units throughout the ARCH communities. of housing over 3 projects, which are on the successful recommendation list. I'll highlight each of those specifically. And a note about the process, just to help you be familiar, we've heard about this in some of our conversations with Lot P and timelines, but applications are due in September. And then again, boy, thinking about $11 million in requests and $4 million of rewards, there's a tough job ahead. And fortunately, there's representation of a community advisory board made up of a combination of affordable housing professionals as well as folks with lived experience that come from the communities that make up the Arch jurisdictions. Bothell is fortunate to have 2 representatives of the 15 that make up that community advisory board currently. That group then makes a recommendation to the executive board, who tends to be very thankful for the work that group does from September to December, and we asked some questions. And this year was probably the clearest recommendation that I think that I'm aware of from my years of following Arch. It was very helpful, and I think the group did a really nice job. And then after the board looks at it, it is transmitted to each governing body within the Arch membership. Tonight is your opportunity. There's a memo that highlights the full consideration of all 10 projects. It's attachment 3 in your packet. One thing I also want to note that really stood out to me, and as we were talking about the Housing Action Plan, I recalled back to the presentation from the Community Advisory Board chair to the Arch Board, which is of note. While we are looking at $4.9 million in a bigger ask, for every $1 awarded from Arch funds, looking back over the past few years, $20 then comes associated with those same projects from other public and private partnerships. And that includes, I just want to note, the Amazon Housing Equity Fund, which is a $3.6 billion allocation from Amazon, where they are providing below market loans and grants with the goal of producing 35,000 units of affordability, focusing on where they have their primary workforce. So the Puget Sound region, the Washington, D.C. region, and the Nashville region. So again, that $1 that comes from Arch ends up tending to be that process gains support from other funding agencies. And so $1 ends up bringing in the equivalent of $20 on top of that. The other thing that stood out to me from the Community Advisory Board chair was that as they made their decision and as they're looking at this process going forward, there were times in the past when there was partial contributions that were made to help projects get off the ground, that sort of thing. But with the demand that is in place for funding for affordable housing, and with that tagline of the strategic plan of building more affordable housing faster, the decision has been made to only provide funding for projects that are on schedule to be ready to go within and utilize that funding within 12 months. And there is the option, because life happens, of an extension of an additional 12 months, but that guidance has really then helped focus and narrow, instead of trying to provide a little bit of funding to a lot of projects. That's why we're saying the funding to really complete and move forward 3 projects. So for some of you who have seen these before, you may be used to seeing more like 5 to 7 projects. But again, the focus this year and the recommendation was to try and narrow it down to move some projects forward. So we're going to look at those 3 projects here briefly. The first one, as I mentioned to some of you earlier, has Bothell in the name, but it's the wrong part of the address, but it's the right part of the region. So on Bothell Way, the Laris project, it's recommended for funding, and it's a project led by the development group Together We Grow, or TWG, in partnership with Imagine Housing. It is in Kenmore. It's a 1.17 acre property. If you're trying to place the location, it is just further west from Kenmore Lanes, or from Starbucks if you're so inclined. It's the current location of Jay's Cafe, if you're familiar with that from driving past. The 2024 award, if approved by all the councils, would be the project's second contribution from Arch, with a previous grant of $250,000 last year's 2023. So there would be a total of $3.65 million. This project would include 175 units specifically for seniors, with a mix of studio and 1 bedroom, offered between 40 and 60% AMI. A couple of additional highlights that were noted of the strength of this project is its location. It's less than a quarter mile away from the Park and Ride in Kenmore. And also, it's already received partial funding from a number of other sources. So again, this one is not only competitive, but it is funded, and with that mindset of let's get projects going that can be delivered quickly. This one fit the bill. The second highlight really accelerates on that. It's a project from the Low Income Housing Institute, who has acquired an existing property. So this building already exists. This is not a rendering. This is an actual picture of the building. And what would be done is, this is located in Bellevue. It would be converting existing apartment buildings to provide 66 units of affordable housing with a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units at affordability levels of 30%, 50%, and 80% AMI. In 2023, again, Arch awarded a portion of funding to this project to contribute to the site acquisition. So this property has already been purchased by the Low Income Housing Institute from previous awards. They received $600,000 in the past. This additional funding that's recommended tonight of $900,000 would help then start paying back on a bridge loan that was their $3.5 million came from the city of Bellevue to accelerate purchasing before it went to another developer. There was also funding that's been received outside of Arch on tax-exempt bonds. The Amazon Housing Equity Fund has contributed to this project, and there was an additional loan from a private foundation. This year's recommendation, again, helps smooth out the bridge loans and move it forward. One of the key advantages of why this project was successful, as I mentioned, is this is a property that's already constructed. So nothing accelerates the availability of housing as already having something, and it eliminates the time to develop a new project. The other thing I'll note that is a highlight of this project is that they are also, as an apartment building, there was 68 units, I believe. There's 2 studios that are being converted into office space to provide 2 case managers and a behavioral health specialist on site. The final project is smaller in scale, but dear to the Issaquah community. This is the Emily House. It is a project being led by the Life Enrichment Options, or LEO group. The recommended award is $482,000, plus a match from the city of Issaquah that would double that. The unit mix here is it's a 5-bedroom group home. It's been in existence since 2000 as being privately operated. This transaction would then keep that ongoing. So putting it into a public-private partnership hands. The project would continue to offer a resource for adults specifically with intellectual and development disabilities, and is in partnership with the King County Housing Authority that provides a mix of rooms at 30% primarily, and then also an additional room at 60% of AMI. Some of the highlights too is that this home is near public transit and several attractive amenities. So that's makes up the composition of what is being recommended for funding. I wanted then also, I felt like to complete the conversation, wanted to highlight that there was in fact then also a project that was proposed but not recommended for funding this time around, and it is a project we've heard about, so Bothell Urban. The reason I'm bringing this in is I know that council is familiar with this, but our conversations with the Bothell City Council have been around the contribution to the land itself, but not the proposed development. That is something that the council is not approving. But so I wanted to share a little bit more about what was proposed and also what the committee recommended on this. So as you know, the proposed project is a joint effort with Bridge Housing and Bothell United Methodist Church, and would be a mix of 200 units as proposed of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom. And as we've talked about over the last year, 3-bedroom is a very rare amenity in affordable housing, and is certainly a need for family housing. And again, just does not happen very often. So that's a strength. The proposal was submitted last September. It also envisions a 6,000 square foot approximate community center as well. So while not recommended for funding in 2024, the Community Advisory Board did note that that was really because of the limited resources for an award in this year's round, and they supported the project and the intent of the project, but there was a few things to wait on. One of them being First was the site control. So as you think about in September, there were still conversations being had here in this chamber around the purchase and sale agreement. So that changes for the next funding cycle, some of the considerations. I mentioned the prioritization of projects that were ready to go and were being funded elsewhere too. So the lack of availability of that, because again, it was just kind of early in the process. And then also what was submitted, Arch had before them was a proposed construction start time of Q4 in 2026. So over 24 months away, and they're trying to highlight things that are going to be moving forward within 12 months. So the applicant was encouraged to reapply. This was nothing to be said about the project itself. It was really more on the timing and where things were at compared to some other projects, but it was very, very highly regarded. Next, I just wanted to give an overall view then of we're talking about what was in this year's, and also mentioned that in your packet tonight is that Arch has now supported over 6,000 units of affordable housing, which is a great thing. And we also know just from our own work, and we talked about the Housing Action Plan, we talked about the comprehensive plan and the numbers that we know about what the adopted housing growth targets are by 2044 in Bothell. 6,000 units would be a Bothell target more than, and it wouldn't even get us necessarily all the way there, not a regional one. So that is where it's important to remember, again, Arch is specifically looking at how do we meet that charge of building more affordable housing faster. So there's going to have to be some changes to this model. We can't just perpetuate this same set, but it is an important tool that's in the toolbox, and I think one that does bring strength to our region. With that, we've reached the conclusion of the presentation. Again, in closing, one resolution does a number of things. I can clarify that if needed. And I do just want to note that I recommend adoption of the resolution tonight. And I'm here to answer any questions or potentially do some follow-up as needed. With that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Councilmember Zorns.
No comments. I do support the resolution. Or no questions. I have comments. So close, but I just appreciate from when I first started on city council and from planning commission, watching Arch grow. And we talked about people gaming the system and Arch rethinking itself and coming up with a game plan to protect itself. And I just appreciate where it's gone, because there was a point where everyone was in a purple panic over where Arch could be going. I love the Emily House. It makes me sad when we warehouse all our adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and putting them in a home setting is wonderful. And if we as a city can encourage residential homes being converted into housing for our disabled adults, that would be fantastic, because they love home feeling as much as anybody. And then I also appreciate the projects spread out through, I don't know, can we call it the Arch region? The area. I appreciate that. I've seen it in the past where Bothell's just kind of been, Bothell, Kenmore, Woodinville have kind of been sitting there with not a lot going on. So it's good to see it being spread out. I understand the temptation of we only have so many dollars, but we want to help a lot of people, and it ends up not being effective. We're just spinning our wheels. So I applaud the wisdom of whoever thought of it. Please tell them I appreciate that, of getting the biggest bang for, or biggest impact for our buck. I really appreciate that. And I think that's all I wanted to say is I love where Arch is going, and I support the resolution.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager. I really appreciate it. I mean, it's a no-brainer, obviously. The thing you hit on at the end, you mentioned that Arch has supported 6,000 affordable units over the time, but it's not even what Bothell needs in the next 20 years. So are the different cities going to, at some point, through their city managers or whatever, like actually have presentations on, like, what's our projection for the next 20 years? How are we going to make a dent in this big problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is definitely, that's part of the element of with the strategic plan too, is recognizing that, the shout out to the city managers and administrators who are part of this, but also understanding that the role that the elected officials play in that conversation too. And so there's been some conversations about knowing that time is precious for, we've had that conversation here recently of there's a lot of demands for your time outside of this room, but how do we utilize that time is there a periodic convening of different arch cities to bring together to have a broader conversation about how do we align all these strategies at the political level as well as at the administrative level, or do we have enough political direction given to us as individual cities to mesh things together? And then also there's trying to find that balance as we look at what are the barriers to affordable housing throughout the region too, as we align those plans. And so Arch is looking, part of the work plan and the budget is adding a temporary position to see how things go around communications, to make sure that the message is circulating to the right places. Maybe it's not just with cities, but with potential partners, or much like Amazon has really started to contribute funding. Is there a communication plan to help bring in more support, but also at the monitoring of legislation as well? So Arch won't be going to Olympia to lobby. That is still the individual city's choice, but Arch making sure to share information of what the impact of legislation could be specifically through affordable housing to help cities build in comments and revisions to bills that would help protect and preserve and accelerate as opposed to unintentionally harm.
Thank you. I also in our comp plan, we had a table. We know, 8,000 or whatever. Like, does each city have its own? And then do we know how much?
Yeah, great question. Gotcha. Yes, and any of the cities that are required for comprehensive planning will have that same element. And then again, in the current structure of things, and where Jason is my backup, so to speak, for Arch Board, is there's also a planning group that gets together from the different cities who are doing that work in comparison. So trying to do that at the staff level, and then the question becomes is how do we start sharing that again more broadly?
Because when you know what your goal is in 20 years, I mean, 173K, 74K round up is that enough, or do we need to have a conversation amongst ourselves to, put in more emphasis on that, increase that amount, or do whatever it needs to support the future needs?
Yeah, for sure, on the trust fund amount, and looking at that is one of the questions is like how do we see a larger infusion of funding in that? But I think that's part of what struck me too with that conversation of the $1 to $20 impact that is made too, is that that's somewhat reassuring. It doesn't completely solve the delta, but it is showing that there's potential momentum to increase that too. So no, I think that's what you're asking for is definitely in that strategic plan action list. That's the type of thing that we have to start solving, is how do we make sure that regionally we're locked arms and know overall this is what we have to produce. Are our strategies going to deliver?
Is there a timeline for when things will get finalized?
Let me take a look and get back to you.
Okay.
There is, but I couldn't speak to
That's
it off the top of my
Okay,
head.
cool. Thank you.
Councilmember Dodd.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. As the deputy mayor said, obviously, I support dispersing our funds as we planned. But the deputy mayor also gave me an idea. Now that for the first time we have our housing targets by income band, and every city that comprehensive plans has those, I would love to see Arch move forward with a plan that says, okay, this is what we know our member cities need to build. As Arch, we want to take on, and I'm just going to make this up, 10% of that, 15% of that, and then come up with funding goals from the cities that help meet that need. I would love to see kind of those targets inform the work that Arch is doing, and really look at sort of distributing. It's cool that we have a Bothell address in there. Like, that's pretty exciting. I think historically we haven't had a lot of projects benefit from the trust fund, and there's all kinds of ways we could talk about why and how and when. But I would love to see this touch, and I don't mean just for Bothell, but each city in Arch has this need, and now we have to meet it. So I would love to see just kind of a cohesion there as we go further.
Thank you very much. And I'll be sure to share that feedback. I think it's one of the things, too, that as an Arch board, one of the conversations we've had is with community-specific goals. The 30-year history of Arch has been around, we'll be less concerned about where the projects go. We want to make sure that they're in the region, but recognizing now, like, the responsibility is to make sure that we're allowing for that development in certain communities. The question is like, do we have to, what is that mindset? How do we look at that? And how do we make sure that there's equitable distribution? Because we also don't want people to say Arch is a disincentive to investing in their own community. So it's interesting to see how the conversation of affordable housing has evolved over 30 years.
Well, yeah, and I think 30 years ago, I was 7. I wasn't super involved in affordable housing. I built a house in my backyard with a refrigerator box. It was pretty affordable. But if you go look at the way people talk about Arch, some folks looked at it as a way to get affordable housing, but not where I live. So I love to see that conversation evolve. And I think it's a good level set for all the member cities to really think about, like, what's important to them. So I'm excited to see that. Thanks.
Councilmember Alders.
Thank you, Mayor. So this conversation has kind of moved into a line of questioning that you might recall the last time we talked about Arch and the comprehensive planning around the different target bands, because I think I had some questions that I would say are still outstanding around the way that 1220 and those income levels like dovetail with the efforts of Arch, and like how are we finding some of those ways. I think I really like Councilmember Dodd's suggestion around, helping achieve funding goals, siting goals, and then ultimately unit goals for each member city so that we are actually helping towards it. But I still wonder if there are, is this something that the advisory committees have been taking on and discussing how, our efforts to build units that perhaps get built in other cities that we're helping fund? Is there a way, I don't even know if it's possible legislatively, that those units that we helped fund in other communities then count towards our goals somehow? Have these conversations been continuing?
Yeah, there's active conversations. There's no solution yet, but definitely something that's on the minds of the membership cities of how do we continue the strength of a regional focus while also making sure that we're responsible for what we're being tasked with doing.
Yeah, and I think you said it around not wanting to disincentivize the good work that Arch does, and so I don't know how fair it is to give everybody credit for the units that are built, but to see somehow that, and I think maybe at our next check-in we can talk more about some of the mechanisms around that. But I still do have some outstanding questions around how is that going to work. But I also wanted to get to a question around updating us on SAMA. I see that you included SAMA in our presentation, but then also didn't say much about it. So how is that going, and when will it be open?
Yeah, absolutely. So did do some searching on that. We've been watching as it comes up, and I absolutely was thinking, what kind of image would work well for this presentation? And so one of the previously funded projects that does so beautifully match our PowerPoint color scheme seemed like a great opportunity. Here's what we know so far is that like many projects in our region and our nation, how many times have you heard about the supply chain? But there has been some supply chain challenges. So, and there's also some outstanding life safety items that are associated with those. So the work is continuing to go through. If you go to their website right now, they are accepting applications with a target opening date of April. I don't know how firm that is. It's something that we'll continue to be monitoring since it is in our jurisdiction. We'll know. A couple of the things that were shared with me is that Imagine Housing and their contractor have at least now secured the necessary materials and are working on setting the schedule of what will need to be happening. They've also, with supply chain, it's always the scarcity of availability and the cost, right? But Imagine Housing has resolved the funding gap that also created some of the delays. So they knew what they needed. They had to be able to find it. They had to be able to pay for it through the cost escalations. They've recently received some awards from the Department of Commerce as well as King County to help close those gaps. So the pieces are coming together now. It's time for the work to be done. We're going to be optimistic that sometime in the spring there will be a celebration, and council will certainly be notified, and there will be some ribbon cutting happening in Bothell.
That's very exciting. It was a cold, rainy day when we broke ground on that project, and I was on council at that time, so it would be really lovely to see it coming full circle and opening while I'm still on council. I also want to thank everybody who's involved in Arch for the recommendation appendix, because I think that there are some really solid recommendations in there for the city of Bothell, specifically, taking into account the work that we're doing here in the city. And so it sounds to me that our housing action plan will at least touch or address most of the recommendations that are in there. Is that accurate? And I'm looking at Jason in case we need him.
Yeah, it'll definitely inform, yeah.
It'll inform
it, yeah.
Okay, great. Those are my questions, but thank you for this presentation and bringing this forward to us. I think that it's really exciting to think that, our contributions could be multiplied by 20. And, maybe in future we'll see that is even a bigger multiplier as more public-private partnerships come together to do this kind of work. So thank you.
I will just say that I really enjoyed the comments from council. Thank you for the presentation. I would have preferred to see the project at Bothell Urban get some funding this year, but it absolutely makes sense with the timeline why it didn't. But I'm glad that first application got in, because I think it'll make it easier next year to apply. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
So we will need a motion and a second.
Yes, there's action. Councilmember Curd.
I move to approve the resolution, adopt the resolution as written in the packet.
Second.
I have a motion to approve the 2025 Arch Administrative Budget and Work Program, authorizing payment of $173,748 from the city's general fund to Arch for their administrative budget, approving Arch's 2024 Housing Trust Fund recommendations, and authorizing Arch to execute documents on behalf of the city with TWG Laris for senior housing in Kenmore and LIHI for Aventine Apartments in Bellevue, approving $124,700 from the city's Housing Trust Fund account to help fund the above-mentioned projects, and redirecting all funds collected in 2024 from the Washington State Shared Sales Tax Revenue to the Arch Housing Trust Fund account. The motion was made by Councilmember Curd and seconded by Councilmember Alders. Dodd. Sorry. Thank you. Would anybody like to speak to the motion? No. I heard you say recommended action. I'm like, at 2, Karsten.
That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Yeah. I know. City Clerk?
Thank you. Please say yes or no when I call your name. Councilmember Zorns?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes.
Councilmember Curd?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodd?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Cabra?
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
All right. It is 7:28 right now. We have one more study session tonight. We are going to break for 12 minutes until 7:40.
7:45.
I tried to make a round. Okay, we're going to break until 7:45.
Stopped.
All right, welcome back. Next up is Agenda Bill 25021, a study session for transportation funding options. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. Tonight we do have one study session, and just as a reference point, recently the council had a retreat, and one of the things that was discussed was about posing specific questions for study sessions. So we are prototyping that a bit tonight too. So I won't steal the questions from the presentation, but I did just want to note that of like we're trying to see if that is a helpful tool, and we'll look for feedback later. So be on the lookout. With that, we do have a team here tonight to walk you through where our plan direction is on transportation funding options. It's a continuation of a conversation that's been going on since last year. With that, I'm going to turn things over directly to our Public Works Director, Erin Lenhart, to lead the presentation. Erin?
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you. As the City Manager mentioned, my colleagues and I are here to continue a conversation that we started in June, actually June the 11th of last year, about transportation funding options. So the action for this evening is we're seeking feedback on two policy questions. One is, does the proposed scope align with the community feedback received? And we'll be talking through that. And does council support continued research into a potential voter-approved levy? Overview for this evening, we're going to start with a timeline, including a brief review of our last session with you. Also, just a very brief transportation funding history again, and then talk about funding needs, including the public input that we used to develop the proposal we have for you, and two policy questions that we've already stated. So here's our timeline. You are here in this bright orange box. What happened in 2024 is we did a community survey around the budget season. We also did the study session that I mentioned in June. And then there was also a comp plan transportation element, a lot of community engagement around that, and that was adopted last December. So hearkening back to June of last year, Council provided some direction to staff. So the things that Council asked us to look into was renewal of the property tax levy, and also to explore transportation benefit district sales tax. Council also provided direction on what you didn't want us to continue working on, and those were transportation benefit license fees. You weren't interested in that, and you also mentioned that you were not interested in the do nothing option at that point in time. I have too many options for moving slides forward, and it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. Also in June, Council provided feedback on guiding principles for this conversation. So those are up on the screen now. So talking about the 2040 Council vision, the Imagine Bothell comprehensive plan, other Council adopted prioritization processes, equity indicators, possible ongoing resources for those ongoing needs, and robust public engagement. So just a short reminder as to why we're having this conversation at all. Through the years, funding specific to transportation has been eliminated. So that we used to collect fees for streetlights, for example, and there was other funding that was eliminated along the way. Council in 2015 formed a transportation benefit district in part to look at what revenue options would be. And then in 2016, went to the voters with a property tax lid lift, which was a 9-year lid lift. and that was what we called the Safe Streets and Sidewalks Levy. And the structure of that, as I mentioned, 9 years. It started at 50 cents per thousand of assessed value in 2017. In 2024, that was roughly 32 cents per thousand of assessed value. The anticipated 9-year revenue for the levy is $46 million. And the goals were related to operations and maintenance, maintaining our major streets, safe school walk routes, high priority crosswalks, and we committed to doing an annual accountability report. The 2023 version was attached to your agenda bill for this evening, and we anticipate coming to you in April to present the 2024 report. And staff are also working on a consolidated report for the duration of the levy thus far to speak to all of the accomplishments that we've made. So, as I mentioned, as a staff, we were looking at what the funding needs were beyond 2025. And as the guiding principles directed us, we looked at primarily at these various documents and conversations and the community engagement associated with them. So the 2024 budget survey, the council's vision, the comprehensive plan transportation element, as well as the 2024 State of the Streets report. So what the primary funding that we included in the proposal on the capital side came from the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. So in that, it has connections via sidewalks, transit, trails, and roads. So those are as contribution towards multimodal projects, also sidewalk and crosswalk program, pavement preservation and safety programs. And the primary, the public input and the pavement needs assessment led us in this direction. And then the public input led us to propose on the op side added resources for safety as well as trail and future bike lane maintenance in addition to our existing operations and maintenance program. So this is the proposal that staff compiled using those sources. And essentially, it's still a lot of maintenance and safety operations. So this would fund the maintenance, the M&O program in addition to additional safety resources, pavement preservation, capital programs for safety, sidewalk, and bike, and then additional increment to help fund those larger projects in the transportation element. So the total funding need that staff have identified is a little over $10 million a year. So that's with a proposed annual total of about $15 million. As I mentioned, we have 2 policy questions. And I'm not going to read them here because I'm going to read them here. So question 1, does the proposed scope align with the community feedback we received? And again, that came from the budget survey that rated maintenance and safety operations as the #1 need. And pavement preservation is also part of that maintenance. And then it also spoke to connections. I think it was number 5, the connections via transit and sidewalks and bike. And then the transportation element has the safety, sidewalk, and bike programs, as well as the capital investments for connections. So, questions, comments?
I'm going to go first because I can. Really appreciate this and the work that went into this. Question on the additional needs, that's for like the larger multimodal projects, that's for like Bothell Way, like things like that, right? Like
Correct.
these, cool. I can almost talk right now. Those are the projects that it seems like we've historically been the most competitive for with grants, and there's the most funding out there for those. And finding sidewalk and small project funding has historically seemed like it's a lot more difficult. And we've got a really big need in it for our community. And additionally, like, you know, for those big projects, like, we just need one entity that funds these things to say yes. But for the smaller projects, like, we need a lot of yeses to get sidewalks built across our city. Like, and I'm curious what the council thinks about this. Like, you know, I'd rather spread that levy funding around to needs that are generally tougher for us to fund than the ones that historically we seem to do really well at and we're really competitive at. So like, I love all of the categories. I'm not sure about the multimodal projects. This is what happens when I don't write something down. You get a lot of ums, and I kind of figure this out as I go. Yeah, I mean, I really don't like constantly answering questions about sidewalks in the community by saying, well, that's really hard to fund and there's not a lot of available sources for it and we're doing the best we can, and basically telling community members that have a need, like, no. And one of the things that frustrated me about the last Safe Streets and Sidewalks levy is the very small percentage of it that went into sidewalks. And, you know, if we look at the breakdown, like, we're looking at, you know, 3 million out of 15, which is an improvement over the last levy that we did. But like, I feel if sidewalks is going to get like half the billing, like, we should fund those capital programs more than whatever percentage 3 is of 15, call it 25%, something like that. So it's better. I appreciate it. I would love to see the funding moved around a little bit in the last one. And I guess it just seems a lot easier to get funding for one big project than it does for a bunch of little ones. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Well, I think a lot of those multimodal projects, especially the ones we have planned going forward, will construct a lot of the city's sidewalk as well as the protected bike lanes. So as we work on those larger projects, it's really with the goal of increasing our multimodal transportation instead of just streets, as historically perhaps the capital projects were focused on. And it is difficult to fund sidewalks. You are absolutely right. And we have, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of sidewalk gaps in the city. So it's an excellent point to be made. And I don't know if Steve has any additional commentary about projects.
Historically, what we've been told is, like, when you go out for a grant, there's like all these different categories, and the more of those categories that you can fill, the better.
Exactly.
So like, I totally get that these are really like Bothell Way is an incredibly important pedestrian bike connection, like, especially because BRT is going there, more housing is going there, like, totally understand that. It's just that seems like a project that, from what you guys have told me over the years, competes a lot better for grant funds than the ones that's, you know, sidewalks in a neighborhood kind of a thing.
Yeah, they do compete better, but they also cost a lot more. So if you're talking about total mileage of sidewalk and protected bike lanes you want to install, they're going to be with primarily in our plan, they're with the bigger projects. And they actually compete better. So if you go after a sidewalk only grant, you're not going to do very well. If you go after sidewalk plus safety plus bike, you're going to do better.
And I think that is the point of what he's saying, though, too, is that if we do compete better for multimodal, should we be focusing on funding locally the things that we don't compete for grant funding as well? Is that a fair
like, I mean,
paraphrase?
the things that we compete really well for grants, like, I would like to spend money on the other things that don't compete really well. So when we have community members ask us about sidewalks and traffic calming and things like that in the community, like we do on a very regular basis, we have a better answer for them other than, well, that's hard.
So I think it's good feedback and something that we can take and be thinking about in terms of how do we calibrate the total. So
And I don't like have a suggestion or like, I don't know. Like, I just, as I look at this, it seems like a really low percentage toward the things that historically we've struggled the most to fund. And to me, the things that we struggle the most to fund externally, like, are the things that I would like to use this internal money for.
Yeah, we'll continue to develop some funding scenarios.
Okay. Yeah.
Real quick, just to make sure I'm like thinking about this right, is some of that because a lot of our grants, and I don't ever apply for grants personally, because we need to match that money. That's part of it, right? Like
We need
it's
to
a grant
match a
isn't just
lot of
money. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So on a $100 million, 228th Street, get your full sidewalks, full bikes, we need to bring up at least about 20%. So the grants will only pay for about 50% of our big projects, and we have to find other funding for the rest of it.
And not to negate your point.
Yeah,
just-
yeah.
No,
But we
yeah.
have other funding sources for those, right? Like we have like other pots of money that we historically use for those.
REITs typically in your capital programs, they're primarily what's funding those capital programs right
Okay.
now. Yeah.
Good. So this isn't the only source of money that we could use for that, correct?
I will also say that some of the capital program funding that's already in there, we're going to be using for matches for larger programs. So the capital programs themselves are being used as a source of match funding as well.
Okay.
I understand that it's a hard time to get these smaller projects, like sidewalk projects. But if you have those smaller projects, and we fund them totally just with local funds, you're not going to get very far.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, and I get that. But like Steve, we get a lot of emails about sidewalks, and I have a lot of conversations about sidewalks.
Yep.
And I am. It really frustrates me when I have to have those conversations with people where I'm basically telling them no as nicely as possible.
Yeah.
And like I would like to have more yeses in those conversations because this is something our community really wants. And like I understand, like we want, the Bothell Way project and 228th and things like that too. I guess I just see more of a future for being able to fund those in other means because I've seen you guys be so successful at it in the past.
I think one way we can do that is start working at a higher level so that the grants are more focused that way. Because right now, the way the grants are set up for some of these smaller projects, they don't give they give $1 or $2 million at a time, and you can only do sections at a time. So we're trying to tailor it to what the grant can give us so we can get the best bang for our buck. But that we also need to be flexible because as that changes or hopefully changes, we can kind of change the way we use things too. I guess what I'm saying is if you toss more things into the capital programs, staff will probably use that as match money for larger projects as well. We're going to do the most we can to get the best bang for the buck as much sidewalks and bike lanes as we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is, it looks like significantly more than half is pavement preservation and M&O. Like I'm also wondering as you look at kind of reallocating this to try to get more money for the sidewalks, that's 50% of the billing on the levy. Like if it's possible to look at allocating money from those as well. I just want to see this levy, build as many projects as we can.
I'll jump in. Okay, which slide was it on? It was slide 10. Thank you for the sidewalk on West Hill going up is that 188th? And West Hill was one of the first projects that was funded through the levy that was passed in 2017. And it wasn't just this section here, but it was also going up 7th towards 240th. And that really has made the neighborhood a lot safer for everybody walking and moving along in that space. And so part of me, like, that was all planned before I even came on council. It happened, and it was something that I really appreciated. And one thing that was added in my neighborhood was a crosswalk, so that it was just like the slightest little nudge. Nobody ever used that crossing. They just like walked along an unfinished, like sidewalkless area because they never thought, oh, I could just cross the street here and get to sidewalk. But then you guys installed the crosswalk there. And now it was just like this gentle little nudge of like, look what you can do. Come over here. And it works. not everybody takes advantage of it, but and so I definitely have seen how this levy has been able to improve the walkability and safety of neighborhoods, and I know that there are many other neighborhoods in the city who want the same treatment. And that's what we hear. That's what our community feedback is telling us, right? There's especially some of the, I think, underserved areas of our community. You mentioned it somewhere here, but kind of looking at the equity impacts of what are the areas that are in most need, and can we prioritize those? And I know that I believe that Public Works has all of the kind of like accident and like near miss data of incidences that occur. And so you kind of know where the hot spots are too. And so I feel like that has always been part of your prioritizing when you've been looking at projects to do.
Right. So for safety, one of the resources that we've included in the proposal is an additional staff person to help with this safety program. We have one person right now, and it's
he's very good and very responsive.
Yes.
But I think he has a lot to his job.
He does have a lot to his job. So that is one of the priorities is increasing our focus on safety with this proposal, and just a reminder as to how the sidewalks were chosen with the last one is the focus truly was on safe school walk routes. And we had a task force of representatives from all the schools in Bothell that helped prioritize that list. And so staff have been plugging away at that list. And we're really fortunate in the beginning, particularly during the pandemic. I think a lot of cities weren't really ready to do projects, and we just kind of kept the money moving, and we kept the projects moving, because I think this project was constructed fairly early in the pandemic. So yeah, and to your point, to look at other areas, we would love to broaden the sidewalk program out beyond just safe school walk routes.
And so has the goal for safe school walk routes been accomplished through the levy, or is there still more work to be done?
There's still more work to be done. There's still, I think, 4 sidewalk projects that remain on the list that we're hoping to complete, that are in various phases of design. One is part of a large, I think it's 9th, large multimodal project on 9th that isn't currently, I don't think, in design, but the other 3 are.
Shelton View is one of them.
I believe so.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Steve is nodding.
I was going to say, you need me to phone a friend again.
Yeah, and so those are areas that I've heard of, that I've definitely heard from. There are other areas that community members have reached out to us that aren't near schools. Mm-hmm. But can we include the senior center as like a quasi school and sort of count it as the same type of project? That so obviously the senior center is not a school, but could we group it as, like a public agency that is serving a subset of our population, and try to get the sidewalks and projects around the senior center prioritized in a similar way?
So we have the project 102nd, a multi-use trail to replace that sidewalk leading from the senior center, and there's sidewalks on the other side.
Mm-hmm, further east.
Oh, so like East Riverside Drive?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't think that that's on our list, since that's not actually like senior center, but senior housing. Yeah, because there is just a little gap there between the 102nd and
the feedback that we hear from the community is that there needs to be better connections between the senior housing and the senior center. Mm-hmm. And since it is is it fair to say that the senior center is a public-private partnership, or is it a public agency? It is a public agency. We should make sure that people can get there safely. Mm-hmm. And so I would like to see it treated like schools. I don't know how you communicate that, but, kind of prioritized with equal weight as schools, is my thought. Okay, I think I'm done.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a public plus 2 counties partnership. When we get more resources for the safety program, I think what would help all of us keep in context, because I want to acknowledge that we get a lot of requests for sidewalks and better safety infrastructure across the city, but your team also sees those because, of course, we do legislative work. We don't build sidewalks personally. We can't speak to that. So it's a partnership when we respond to people. A map of, and I've talked before about maybe like a heat map of near misses, but just a heat map of areas even that need attention, that we acknowledge that can help people. I think it's really easy to focus on the sidewalk you want in your daily route and lose track of missing infrastructure that you never see in your day-to-day life. And so just better ways to show people not just here's all the need, have a good day, but like here's the different, here's what's prioritized, like something that helps people really contextualize the city, plus what we know we need, what we're working on now, and like even that we know there's a problem and that kind of stuff might help. Because I struggle sometimes talking to folks and I don't ever want to tell anyone, well, you need it less than someone else, because I just don't know. And that's not really how we should talk to people. But I also want to make sure that we all kind of have a chance to understand the full scope of the need, because I think that that's really difficult. Like I said, you live your day-to-day life. Like even when Councilmember Aldrichs brought up Shelton View, I'm like, well, we have a sidewalk from this program, but it's the entrance I use versus the front entrance. Like it's kind of interesting, just thinking about what you see and what you don't see. So that's something that I thought of. I actually had a note in here with talking about near misses. I would just love a way to kind of illustrate that to folks. So, and to answer your actual question, I think the scope aligns. I know that because we receive grants and it's like, do we get it or not? Like we're constantly pivoting to make sure we spend our money in a way that gets us the most sidewalk for our dollar, right? I'll simplify it. I realize it's not just sidewalks, but, and like, I'm good with it. I think you guys do great work with not an unlimited budget, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Broken record here. Because everybody had great ideas here, and I just thought I would throw them out there just to make sure they don't get buried into things. And I've talked with our city manager about the sidewalk from the senior center into downtown is challenging for seniors and for people who aren't really stable on their feet. So you're aware of that. So never mind. And so when the bridge gets replaced, we can look at lighting and the sidewalk and all that other good stuff.
We have a separate project, the 102nd multi-use path from Riverside to the bridge, and then also from the bridge to Main Street, I believe. And then the bridge will provide that link in the middle. Perfect. Once we replace that.
Perfect.
So we'll handle like both ends of it. But yeah, I think tackling that portion between Riverside and the bridge would be great.
And then Councilmember Aldrichs brought up East Riverside Drive, which, way back when you were our interim city manager, you heard me hand wring remotely over missing sidewalks on the eastern portion of East Riverside Drive, and there's 2 manufactured home parks and you got no parking signs up there, which was great, but there's really no place for people who we have that gentleman in a wheelchair who drives down the middle of the street, and with the bus stop sitting right there on the corner, and I thought, I wonder if, and you're going to know the answer to this, where there's bus stops, is there any possibility that we could get Sound Transit to come alongside and fund for some of those sidewalks in dangerous portions on the roads?
So Sound Transit doesn't serve
or whatever the bus,
King County Metro. I don't think so. I don't think they Yeah, they don't typically
those
fund
rascals.
walkways.
Okay, we can
Yeah,
always
exactly.
ask.
Yeah, exactly. I can
With a
say,
meaningful pause and
it
make them
makes a lot of sense
uncomfortable.
to us.
Yes, okay. Well, no, that's important to know, and
Yeah.
maybe that's something that we need to like make noise over and see if we can change that fabric a little bit. And ever since I started on city council, I would hear about other communities coming up with innovative ways to create sidewalks. And I would love that if we could just keep our antenna out for ways to do more sidewalks, getting the community to come alongside, say that their neighborhood does not have, they're not high on the priority. Well, if that community is willing to pay for the costs for something like even an asphalt sidewalk, could we do that for them? That's, just a question, because then that's giving us more sidewalks through the city. And, the other thing that just hit me on, and I knew this, but I forgot about this, snow plows are part of this. And I was like, so if the levee fails and it snows, what do we do? And I think I'm connecting dots that in the past, we had other income coming in through streetlights and things that covered snow plows. So maybe when we message out on the levy, it's just an idea, talk about how those funding sources no longer exist, and that's why we're asking for because I could see someone saying, well, they're not managing their money well. Well, when we had money to manage for it, we could do it, but now we need to find a different way to fund it. So anyway, I would let the hesitant taxpayer know that there used to be funding, but it wasn't through negligence of our own that snowplows got dropped. So that's the only comments that I have on that. Oh, you want feedback on the scope? Scope is great, and I think. And does council support continued research into potential voter approved levy?
That's question number 2. If we're
We're
ready
not
to
there
move. I
yet.
don't
We're
think
just on
ready.
question 1. Okay,
on question
I'll just stick with question 1.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. This is, obviously there's a problem that we need to solve. It's just about how do we prioritize, and I think I agree, I don't think, I know, I agree that we need to towards the scope that you mentioned, towards the question, I feel like prioritizing smaller, the project that we cannot get grants, as was, otherwise could get grants for, I think will be a good thing, based on what we're hearing from the community. That's a good thing. The thing, I had a question, I did not, or I did not, can you, do you know you probably do, the history of why we stopped funding? Why did we go to a levy and not, and why did funding stop before the decision was made to do a levy?
Right, so let's see, I'm trying to remember back. A couple voter initiatives reduced funding that go to streets. So do you remember back? One moment, please.
So it was a state funding thing? It wasn't a city funding thing?
Right,
Oh,
it was
I
state,
see.
it was primarily state funding, so there are 2 voter initiatives that reduced, I think it was state funding,
I believe it was I-740-97.
yeah, and
The-
670 something.
They reduced the property.
$30 car tab.
They reduced the car tabs and they reduced the property taxes down from 6% to 1%, which is where we are today.
I
So
see.
those were initiatives, I'm tracking the question. So those were initiatives that were passed in the late 90s, something
Yeah.
like 97, 98, along those timelines.
Yeah, thanks to a good friend of ours. Yeah. I know.
And so,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for this, because it's a really good and important context, because when we had a conversation, because I know the do-nothing option is not really an option, because there's obviously a problem to be solved, so we need to solve the problem, and the problem requires money. So the question is, how do you get that money? And one question I posed, I remember, I think last year when we were having this conversation, and I'll ask it again, is is there an option that we can leverage, and maybe we haven't thought of, that would not require a levy, some sort of fees, something else that will reduce the burden on the taxpayer, and either move it elsewhere, or the city can figure out how to manage it that way.
I'll take a stab at this, and others can chime in as I take a stab. So if the gap is, as this chart shows, about $10.3 million annually, that's quite a big chunk of change. So there's other options on the table that could be used. You could choose to increase the sales tax. You could take a voter-approved levy to the sales tax. It would get you half of that rate. So it would generate about $5 million out of the 10. So it's not going to get us the whole way there. When it comes to how cities are funded, I kind of think of it as a three-legged stool. There's fees and things, which are usually things that are direct services that we are delivering that we can attach a fee to. So common things that you think about that are like water rates, or permit fees, things that you are delivering a specific thing, and we're saying you need to pay the full cost of whatever that thing coming back to us is. Those are pretty much tapped out here at the city from what I can see. The next thing is your big taxes, your sales tax, your property tax, your business taxes. We have a business license fee here at the city. We obviously have a sales tax, and we have property taxes. Those are the big three, the three big taxes options. The final option that I think about when I think about that big pie chart are what I call intergovernmental revenues, or state shared revenues. We get like alcohol fees from the state, cannabis fees from the state, those types of things. Those also substantially go to things that are needed to generate those things more often than not, especially when it comes to cannabis. There's a police tie to it, or to alcohol, there's also a police tie, into human services tie to those dollars. So state law allows us lots of different options to think about how we raise revenue. In the end, the way the state is set up, at least this state, other states might be different. I've never worked in a different state. But this state says that your main three sources of revenue are going to be your property tax, your sales tax, and whatever business tax you choose, which in this city, we've chose a business license fee. I can't come up with something, Quan and I have talked about it. We can't come up with something that's a one source that gets us to a $10 million piece, that gets us anywhere close to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I get it. You can't have one source. Or can we have multiple sources? That's the thing. Multiple things that will. Sure. This is the question that I have. Like, because right now it seems to me like you either tax or levy.
Sure.
Or not. Well, we know we don't want the not option. Right? Because we need to fund. We need these projects. So the question is, how do you fund? Right now, there's only one option on the table, or option option 1A and option 1B. There's no option 2 or 3 or 4. That's my question. And can we have a conversation around that?
I think we could have a conversation about that. I think that if that is the question, that's the will of the council, because that, of course, is my job is to ask. Tonight 6 of you, but usually 7 of you. Is that the conversation you want to have? And if so, then yes, we can do that. Go ahead.
And that might lead into question 2, and to hold on to that too.
Can I sneak in? There's too much debate happening of who was going to speak. So I just have a brief question. At one point on the Engage Bothell website, there was a map of the city where people could click and say, I have problems here. I don't know if that's still available on the website. And I know that it's a project of the Community Development Department, but has Public Works been able to connect with that data and utilize it for your planning purposes?
Yeah, I believe those maps ended up in the transportation element. So there were heat maps around like the requests from folks as well as where the, like the intersections that had the most accidents and that sort of thing. So they live at least in the transportation element, and we can put them back on the website too.
Yeah, I thought for a while it was just available, and so I got used to it just being there, and I thought I expected that it would just stay, and so now it's not there anymore, and I was like, oh, but how do people like go in and say I had a problem in this area and I want to tag it? But that also like leads me to another question of can other departments like Parks and Public Works use the Engage Bothell website? And like you can put projects up on there?
I'll follow up with you.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, thank you. Because I think it's a really great tool, and I don't want community development to have all the fun with it.
Sharing is caring. I love that too, because I don't think we would, but I wouldn't want to start from zero on like a heat map. Like let's use, if we keep asking people to put data in and then it's like, oh, well, now we need it again, you know. I was going to say, I appreciate, you know, it shouldn't be as simple as levy, no levy, but I think some of the stuff I would want to inform like our legislative agenda for not even this session, which we're still in the middle of, but like the being capped at like the 1%, like we can see now how over decades, like inflation is very rarely 1%, especially in my personal lifetime. And then we've just consistently had less funding, that things get more expensive. Somebody mentioned supply chain earlier, Kyle. So just as things get more expensive, that cap really hurts us. And I don't want us to necessarily have to go after, like if we can start to just kind of course correct for the whole state, not to sound crazy, but we can't fix it all in Bothell because we're so limited in the state. And people do have a very high property tax burden. Our part is a very small part of it, but nobody thinks, oh, well, the city's not my problem when they pay their property tax bills. So I would love to look at more revenue sharing and better ways to just alleviate the systemic problems versus like, I'm also hesitant to change, like you, Tony had mentioned that our business tax mechanism was licensing. If we change too much as we're looking at our economic vitality plan, then the plan becomes less useful because it's not the environment we evaluated. So I want to see more options, but I also want to see some way of fixing some of this at the level that it's at, which is just unfortunately out of our, so hopefully that feedback made sense.
Well, and even, you know, directly related to this conversation is gas tax, right? So that's the only other source of funding we have for our street operations right now. And that has been rapidly declining. I think last year it was $800,000, and I think the previous year it was closer to $1 million. So it's it's tanking very quickly, so to speak. You get it?
No, we heard that things were tapped with water too, so I'm into it.
And, you know, and the conversations at the state level have been about road usage charges and things like that, you know, more creative ideas instead of just continuing to have these astronomical gas taxes like, well, nobody's using gas, so now we need to make it more expensive. It's like, we're not winning this challenge.
I agree. There are systemic issues and require long-term and beyond, like we talked, beyond just the city of Bothell. In the short term, it'll be good to have a conversation. It could inform, like it'll be an intentional decision that we made. Yes, the levy right now for the next budget. Yes, that's what we need to do. But in the meantime, we're going to have a conversation at the higher level and regionally to be able to, you know, alleviate the systemic problem that we have, so that we don't have to continuously go back to the residents and say, hey, we need more money. It's like at some point they're going to say no, you know, so that's it.
Well, yeah, and I my hope too is like working with our lobbyist who works with other cities, right, in their whole firm, like let's jump in and have like a unified message that's like, hey, we are all struggling with the same problems. It's not just city A or city B can't budget. It's the way we budget under state law sucks. Like, let's fix that. So the more we can kind of come out together, I think something cool could happen.
I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Okay, let's finish up question one so we can move on. My feedback. Okay, oh my gosh. Thank you for the presentation. I concur with a lot of things that have been said already, so I'm not going to echo them. But in June, I was really incredulous that we would be funding a lot of maintenance and operations with levy dollars, and I'm starting to understand through reading and everything, but just so it's on the record, what, like the breakdown of it being maybe 2/3 of it being operations and maintenance, or not operations, but safety operations and maintenance. That's like the most significant gap that would be filled here. And is it just because we lack the systems in place that used to fund these things, and we can't incorporate them into our daily, our like normal budget, so we have to compensate with additional resources? Is there no other thing, like the example of the street sweepers and the snow plows and the traffic lights and like these things that people expect, whether or not they vote yes or no, are going to have to be delivered? How are we going to do that if it fails?
I'll take a stab, but I might shift it over to City Manager Standard here in a minute as well. I think, so I heard a couple of different thoughts in that, so I'm going to try to grab a couple of them. The first thought I heard was around, is this really, I agree, levies for ongoing costs is a real challenge. It hurts my core, actually. I also know that where we are in the city of Bothell right now, direction to us could be, we want you to look at this, but over the next X number of years, we want you to also think about a different path and a different plan for the future. So I think where we are in Bothell right now, I think it's where we're at. It does not mean the future can't change, and direction to staff to do that work would be probably an okay thing for us to do, to be honest with you. So that's where my first question's at. The second question, if we have no funding, what do we do? Well, where I would stand on that, and I'd have to refer to our finance director and our city manager, is that you would look at us and say, well, go back and get us an option. What's the impact? What's it look like? What are we going to do? What choices does council have to make? Because the pot's still a finite pot. And I can guarantee you, at least I hope, there's 7 people, 6 tonight, but 7 usually, that says, I have an infinity number of visionary things I want you to accomplish. And I still only have this much, right? And it's called priority setting, and it's really painful, and it's hard. And that would be the discussion we would have to have if that is your direction to us. And I would rely back to my finance director, my city manager.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well said, Tony. And I think the thing I'd add is that then when we look at our existing budget of 25 and 26, one of the things that we talked about was how the current levy does go through 2025, and so we can predict what that looks like. And then we do have like fund balance that would keep a core of operations going for 26. But that kind of then evokes what the future state would look like, is when we're talking about the projects that the community is asking to deliver and that sort of thing. That's what's absent in this model. And so to the deputy manager said, well, of like, we can see that a no action option is not feasible. I do think that finding a strategy to say over the course of this levy, what is the way that how do we reallocate and redistribute, thinking about what are the opportunities in future legislative agendas. I really appreciated that dialogue here tonight of let's be thinking about how do we communicate this in real terms? How do we do that along with other cities and not have it be just, a bullet point, speaking point, but how do we tell a story of what things look like? And so perhaps putting some effort into that over a period of, closer to a decade than just a legislative cycle. How do we continue with that messaging, that sort of thing? I think the encouragement of finding a strategy of that, we know the destination that we're looking for is let's find a way to fund those things differently outside of a levy, and having the long-term vision to deliver it makes a lot of sense.
I like that. And it sounds like you have direction, so if you needed a fourth voice, there it was. We can move on to question number 2 now, and I think my answer is yes.
Thank you.
It's possible to do it that fast. That's wild. I'm a clear yes on this too. Like, I mean, a big factor for me is like our residents have already told us yes on this levy once, and if this is something that they want, I am not going to be the person to tell them no. They are going to have to tell us no themselves. I'm also much happier having a tax that the community authorizes rather than doing something councilmanic. Like, if we have the choice, I'm much happier to say, hey, you want this, like, please do it, rather than me saying, we think you want this, please do it. Yeah, I said my piece about the percentage allocations, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come back with next time about that, but absolutely supportive of the levy.
Boom, democracy. Let's do it.
Thank you.
And I think the bullet points here and the conversation we had in question number 1, thank you for keeping us on track. I think that's a good discussion for moving forward. Yeah, I think for now, I mean, it's not like we have a lot of choices, you know. So, but it's good to have an intentional decision. When we make a decision, it's because we had a good discussion and like this is the conclusion we came to, you know.
Thank you.
Wow, you look very interested. I have not heard from the community I haven't heard grumbles or, any kind of upset about, that sidewalk levy. It's usually been very, very complimentary and positive. And there's definitely more work to be done. So I'm very open to giving the voters another opportunity to approve this funding, for the projects that we know they want funded. So thank you.
Yeah, you'll be bringing these things back for us to have a conversation. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we bring it back in June-ish, give or take.
Thank you.
You need an answer for question 2 now?
I'm ready for you.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. All right. So I think that's it for us this evening. Thank you all so much for your feedback. Appreciate it.
Unless Councilmember Curd wants to have a few more conversations, I think it's probably safe to adjourn now.
I think we can adjourn, Mayor.
Okay, adjourned.